What's up guys, Justin here with the RenderingEssentials.com, back with another Lumion tutorial for you. So in today's video we're going to talk about how to use the animated phasing feature in order to create a phasing sequence animation where different parts of a building fly in and the building's kind of constructed piece by piece inside of Lumion. So let's go ahead and just jump into it. Alright, so note that this got added in Lumion 11, so if you have a version older than that, you're not going to be able to access this feature. But what I want to do is I want to go into my example models, and there's a model that's set up in here for the animated phasing effect, and we can kind of talk through some of the basics, and then we can bring in a simple model from SketchUp where I can show you kind of how you would set everything up in order to create that animation. So let's go ahead and open up the Valley Winery model right here in our examples. All right, and so first off, I've turned my editor resolution down a little bit just so this isn't really heating up my computer in the background trying to render all of this stuff. So that's why the quality is a little lower than usual. But what we want to do is we want to click over into the movie mode. That's where we're going to be able to access the animated phasing. So if we click into movie mode, like this, you can see how there's already some animated phasing videos in here. So there's videos where they show like the basic phasing animation and how that can look. Notice how the parts are going to kind of fly in here like this. So that's one example of the way this looks. There's another example over here where the same thing comes in, but it's a little bit different because it's phased in with different groups instead. And so what we want to do is we want to add our own phasing animation. And so the way that we do that is we need to add a new clip. So we're going to click over here and we're going to click on record. And for now, I'm just going to click the plus button to add a keyframe. So all I'm doing is setting my camera view at the moment. Then we're going to click on the checkbox and we're going to go back over here. And just for simplicity's sake, we'll just add a realistic preset right here. Well, now let's add our phasing preset or effect. So we're going to click over here on add effect. And you want to go into, it's under featured, but I think it may also show up under animation. We want to add animated phasing to this model. And so when we add animated phasing to this model, that's going to pop up this little option right here where you can click on edit. And so edit is where you're going to be able to adjust this phasing animation. So notice how right now nothing is happening, but what it gives us is it gives us a timeline down below as well as a menu over here where we can edit the different objects in our animation. And so there's a few different options in here, like the effect that you can use in order to bring things in, as well as the start time and duration of these effects. So first off, let's add a couple objects. So the way that I'm going to do this is I'm just going to click on the button right here for the pencil, and we're just going to add a couple objects. Let's go ahead and let's fly around and maybe pick up some of these walls. So we'll just pick up the perimeter walls real quick. And notice how they turn green when you click on them in order to indicate that they're selected. Alright, so now we have 3 walls selected. So once we're done selecting the objects that we want, we can click on the button right here for Save Changes. Well, now what this has done is this has associated those 3 walls with this animation right here. Well, notice how now if I click and drag in here, that wall is going to fly into my scene. So at the beginning of this clip, there's no wall. And if you drag this to the right, the wall is in place. And so that, in the most general sense, is how we're going to set up these different animations. But now let's take a look at a couple of the effects that are available here. So if we click on this drop down, right now this is set to pop in. Well, let's say that you wanted this to fall out of the sky instead. You could set this to a sky drop instead of the pop in. What that's going to do is that's going to bring this in from the sky right here. So you could have the different pieces fly in. You could also set them so that they rise out of the ground into place like this. Or you can set this with the implode feature, which is kind of an odd one, but it just has everything come from way out like it had been exploded, and then it brings these together and puts them in place. So you can really set any of these that you want. I kind of like the sky drop effect myself. And so there's some options you can set in here, like the move distance. So that's going to set like how far out this moves in from. So you can adjust the way that that looks a little bit with this slider right here. And so now let's go back and let's add something else. So let's add another clip in our animation. So to do that, we're going to click on this button right here for Add Phasing Animation. So that's going to add a second animation in here. Well, now we need to link that to some objects. So in this case, I'm just going to click on my pencil, and I'm just going to select the windows this time around. All right, so now we have our windows selected. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on Save Changes. And so when we save our changes, now you can see that not only are our walls going to drop in, but our windows will drop in as well. And somehow I selected the ground in here, and I guess that's okay. We can kind of leave it as is. But let's look at some options for how we can adjust these down here. So for example, let's say that we wanted our windows to drop in after our walls are in place. Well, the way that we could do that is we could select our phasing animation number 2, and we could set our start time to 1 second. So what that means is that now 1 second after this clip starts, our windows are going to fly into place like this. And so one thing we may want to do is we may want to set our phasing animation to be a little bit longer. And the way we can do that is to uncheck the auto, and we can adjust the length right here. So now you can see how we have a lot more time in here. So we can adjust our first and second animations like this. So now if we click play, our walls are going to drop in, and then our ground and our windows will drop in. So, and because the ground plane got selected in there, I might take this and set this to be a ground rise instead. So I might want my walls to drop in, and I might want my windows to come out of the ground. But you can see how we have that second animation set up right here. And then, let's say we wanted to add a third. All right, so what we would do to do that is let's go ahead and let's add another phasing animation down here. So we're just going to click on phasing animation, and for this one we want to add all of these furniture objects that are in here. And you can set this, by the way, by clicking on the outdoor objects, so you can only see the little dots for objects that are set as outdoor type objects inside of Lumion. But I'm going to go through, select all of these, and then click the checkbox. Then I'm going to set this one to start at 3 seconds. Like this. And we're going to set this one so that they drop out of the sky. So now, if I play this, I've got my walls dropping in, I've got my windows coming in, then I've got these dropping down. And all of these seem a little bit fast, so what we can do is we can adjust their duration. So for example, instead of having phasing animation 1 drop in with a duration of 1 second, let's give it a duration of 3 seconds. So we're going to make this animation a little bit longer. Then this one, we'll change our start time to around 3 seconds, and we'll set our duration to around 3 seconds as well. Notice how you're getting this dark bar in here. The dark bar is indicating the part of the animation where the movement is actually occurring. That's going to be your duration. So then this one, we'll move it over to 6 seconds, and we'll set our duration to 3 seconds. Well, now, if we click on play, this animation is going to come in, but it's going to come in a lot slower. So you can use this to adjust how quickly or slowly these objects come in, just like this. So in addition, if you don't want these all dropping in at once, like this, you can adjust the stagger so that these get brought, so that they don't get brought in at the exact same time. So I'm going to click and drag this. Well, notice how now this is just going to kind of randomly bring these in. And one thing I might adjust is I might have the move distance be a little bit lower in here, so they're not coming quite so high out of the sky when they come in. But notice how now if I click play, I've got some kind of like random stagger in here as well. And you can play around with this effect a little bit in order to get the result that you're looking for. Okay, so now let's say that this gave us everything that we were looking for in our animation. So what we could do is we could click on Save Changes, then we would go back in here. And so note that our animated phasing is set up inside of our effects. We can control the camera location by using the Edit Clip function. And so what we want to do is, let's say, first of all, we want this clip to be longer, right? We want the whole thing to be, we'll call it 10 seconds. And so now, let's add another keyframe just by moving our camera and clicking on Add Camera Keyframe. So then we'll add a third right here. So that has set our camera movement, right? And I'm going to adjust my overall camera length so that it's about 30 seconds long. Whoops. Or we're going to click on the checkbox right here. So now our clip is going to be 30 seconds long. And so we've set our camera movement by setting those different views inside of our clip. And then we've set our actual animation using the animated phasing right here. We can go in and adjust that. So let's say we want the whole thing to be shorter. Let's say we want the whole thing to be maybe like 15 seconds long. So then we'll save this. We'll notice how now your camera movement's going to be more pronounced. And you're still getting this animated phasing coming in here just like this. So you can use this in order to set up these animated phasing clips. And then from there, once you were done, you just click on the button for Render Clip in order to go through and render that out. And I'm not going to do that right now just because that's going to be fairly time consuming, but that's how you would render this when you were ready to render it. All right, so now let's bring an example project from SketchUp into Lumion so we can take a look at what this process would look like with your own models. So this is a quick model that I've put together using Medic's Wall and Medic's Truss extension and Flex Tools for the windows. And so the first thing you're going to notice is when you set things up, you're going to want to group them by the different groups that you bring into Lumion. And so there's a reason for that, and the reason is you have to bring in the parts and pieces of your model separately. So you basically have to import everything based on the groups that you want to fly in separately. So let's go over into Lumion 11. I'm going to create a new project, and we'll go ahead and say that we're going to bring this into, let's use the suburban environment as a base. All right, so what we want to do is we want to import a SketchUp model. And so I have a version of the SketchUp model where nothing's grouped the way that we need it to be. And so we're just going to go to Import, and so it's just my phasing example, no grouping. And if I bring that in right here, and I have a SketchUp models folder, I'm going to go ahead and bring that in. And then I'm going to drop this right here. I know the house doesn't really fit in with the neighborhood, that's fine. So if we look at this right here, we can bring this house in and we can go ahead and we can animate it, right? So we can go into our movie mode and we can add a quick movie. So we're just going to record. We'll set a keyframe right here, make it a little bit longer, click on the checkbox. So right now, if we bring this in and we'll apply a realistic style and we'll add the animated phasing. Well, if we add the animated phasing right now, and we want to add an object, notice how the only object that we have in here is our overall SketchUp model. So it doesn't bring this in with that hierarchy of things that we need in order to animate this, right? So now if I click on the checkbox, then I animate this, and let's say we want it to do the sky drop. If I bring this in, you're just going to have this one model that drops in here, right? You can see how it has the other detail in it, but there's no way to access it inside of Lumion, right? You can't like access the different parts and pieces. That's why it's going to be important to bring these in separately. And it's a little bit frustrating to have to do just because there is definitely some additional work associated with that. But let's go ahead and I'll show you how to do it. So the way that's going to work is, first of all, let's go back into build mode for a second. I'm just going to delete this out. So delete, delete. All right, so now what we need to do instead is we need to take all of those parts and pieces from our model and export them to separate model pieces. So I'm going to right click. And in order to do that, all of these are going to have to be components, I believe, because then you can right click and do a save as. So I'm just going to convert these all to components. I think there might be an extension that can do this faster, and so I'm just going to export these real quick by doing a save as. And notice that I'm basically exporting each one of these groups as a separate model. So we'll save our slab, we'll do a save as, we'll save our studs. All right, so now we have those saved. We want to import them into Lumion. And so the way that I want to do that And so I just want to come over here. I want to import my slab. And we'll go ahead and create a folder for this. We'll call it phasing animation. We'll just drop this in, and we'll bring our other pieces in here. And by the way, if anyone knows a faster way to do this, let me know. Alright, so now we've got our parts and pieces in here, and so what we're going to do now is we're just going to go do our animation. So the way we're going to do that is click over into movie mode, and let's go ahead and let's add a new clip right here. So we'll just click on record, and we'll just set a view kind of up above right here, and we'll just set our camera keyframe. And I'll go ahead and set this to be a 10-second animation for right now. Well, now what we would do, and I'll go ahead and add a realistic preset to this, is we would just add our animated phasing effect. We're just going to add the different pieces that are in here. So, for example, to start, I'm going to want my slab to come in. So we're going to go find our slab. Right here, and click on that. Click on OK. So that is when our slab is going to pop in. And we'll go ahead and set the duration on this to, we'll call it 2 seconds for right now. So our slab's going to pop in now at 1 second. Let's add our framing popping in. So we're going to add another phasing animation. Set this to be our framing. And notice how having these named out separately can be really helpful, because you can see which ones are which based on the name that pops up. So we'll go ahead and click on wall studs. So that is going to show up right here. We're going to set our start time on that one to, we'll call it 2 seconds for right now, and give it a duration of 2 seconds. And then we're just going to do the same thing for all the other parts that are in here. So we'll add another phase for our trusses. And we're going to have to make our phasing length a little bit longer, so we're just going to uncheck this automatic for right now, and then we'll adjust that manually in a second. So now I'm going to go through and I'm going to add the phasing for the rest of the pieces of my model. And I'm going to speed this up so that you don't have to sit here and watch me work on this for like 20 minutes. Alright, so now, if we were to play this, you can see how our slab pops in, and our framing, our trusses, etc. All the different parts and pieces now come in here, and they grow in. And you could definitely come in here and adjust these so that they like drop in as well. So if you didn't like the pop-in effect, for example, we could use the sky drop effect. I wish there was a way to change all of these at once. That would be really convenient in case you decide and you have a complicated phasing animation that you wanted to see how it looked with one of these other animation types. But we'll go ahead and we'll switch all of these to the sky drop. So then once you're done with that, we'll go ahead and we'll edit our overall clip so that it's 20 seconds long. Go ahead and click right here. So we'll set the whole thing so that it's 20 seconds long. Click on OK. And now if we play this, all of our different parts and pieces are going to come in here. Then you could render out that animation as well. And you could definitely adjust this so that your camera changes angles in the middle of the clip. So for example, let's say we wanted the camera to maybe move over here or something like that. You can click on this button right here to update that keyframe. And now you've got the camera moving while this is going. Then once you're done, you can just click on the button right here to render the clip in order to render out your final result. So that's where I'm going to end this video. I know the process. So the process is a lot better than it was trying to create this kind of animation. I would hope in the future to see a workflow where we can at least have something where we can import the parts and pieces without having to place them manually. By the way, if you know about a way to do that, let me know. I'd love to hear about it. But that's probably the most time-consuming part of the process. Once you get everything in, animating it really isn't that hard. I think they've made that process pretty easy. But leave a comment below. Let me know what you thought. If you liked this video, please remember to click that like button down below. If you're new around here, remember to click that subscribe button for new rendering content every week. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. I really appreciate it, and I will catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.